Yeah. Dad turned gray earlier.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the process of
Hi, Julie. Hi, Barry. Hi.
so good to see you guys. Man.
I don't think you've met Carter, my son. Yeah. 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 It's been a long time.
Yeah. Certainly the worst half of that transition. Yeah. This is Carter.
Yeah. This is my wife. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's nice. Good to see you.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, Brady's dad.
Well,
I didn't realize our neighbor.
yeah.
Yeah, Brady. So I coached that team with Carter and Brady for us.
How old are you?
Hard to believe, right? Stay weak.
I'm 50. So do the math on that one. It's easy.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Good.
Yeah. We're division.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Very good to see you.
There was a little cord for this that plugs in.
Oh,
You remember Carter?
well, not the scale.
I know.
But
Or the scale. Just check it on my phone. Yeah, about that.
It's,
Yeah, I never knew.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You.
Pass it on down. Yeah.
Hello.
I didn't.
Yeah. Well, it's like.
So I did it. I'm like,
This is the next MRI. I'm here.
Aaron, this is Miss Carter. Yeah. Aaron. Yeah, the rear of the hearse.
I'm getting out of the way.
We don't need no pallbearers.
Fantastic.
I did now I can see you. Better.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, always worked. Yeah. Early.
Maybe when she finds the balance of medicine. Yeah. I see. Well, we're starting a business.
Yeah.
Some sort of medication. Yes. Sometimes they have multiple meds.
Oh, I used to.
And you can give it a try if it doesn't work. No harm.
Sunscreen. Yeah. Hey, John.
Yeah. I don't have to. Well, there's very good. Yeah, but so that's one of the. It's just like I take a daily.
John.
So I take it every morning. And it totally right. But
I did. I knew your kids when I was growing up.
it's
My
amazing.
sister is over there. She was
Now I
married.
just take one this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. She's trying to.
How are you? Good. It's been a minute.
I always tell
How are
them-
you doing?
I always tell them,
Good. It's good to see you. I know you understand.
and he said,
Oh, yeah.
No. It's frustrating. It's defeating some days.
"You used to
You
too much.
try to be positive.
There's too much.
Most of the time you
Third
can.
Avenue, just like First Avenue, like,
Yeah.
he was in Mr. Ross. He did say that, but the man just needs.
Take off my jacket.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, no. I-
Better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just where you're at.
All day. It's been all day.
Yes.
Well,
Listen.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
Oh, it's getting worse. He's got. It was open. Now you got chairs. You got.
My girlfriend actually got me the job there. Yeah, she only works on Saturdays, but I get to choose on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's just we work about 6.5 hours. We don't even get a single like 10.
Karen? You know,
Yes. Is there another problem? Come on over. Are there any others?
I guess I did. And I also. Just once I get it out. I know.
خين خطير رام يا بيش خطير نابتيت نقبال لهم يكملون صوت من بولوكي خذ الحمج ال امونا بين عبر ستيت ياش صوت من بفوق ارمي يوم ما تشاري بما تما من خير ما بيشوف يا صوت من بفوق مع السيد ميو مالو ما تسي ستيك دارنا لا عمي Ladies and gentlemen, if I can remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones for the service. Don't have a copy of the service handout, please take one, because the whole idea is that Mary and Julie, that your voices are people will watch online as well. Whether that sure that people who and love Steve the most are service here now, and of course later on. I'll share some words, and Maury and Mary and Julie will all have something to say. And it won't come as much of a surprise that Steve wrote his own eulogy. When we come back to Maury and a chance to let everyone to share their words also. So if you'll look on that first page, let's read responsibly. The rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. The opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. The rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we have joys we are to share, we remember him. Dialogue, no extra. No deshing of the thing, I'm paying the fuck out of it. After you should have got paid the market, said it, but not you. Gam Gale, the gates of Mabit Low, you're about here. She took her mission to have him a yellow. I wrote of an eye shall conduct for a light shot. She said, I told the husband of the shafted the bait out of nine, or Yamin. This 23rd Psalm is so familiar to all of you. It's I think it speaks actually so perfectly to the spirit that Steve had, especially as you nursed him along those last days. Hey, I walked through that valley of the shadow of death. He didn't live in fear, but in hope. He wasn't ready to give up. He wasn't ready at all. But he wasn't in fear either. So let's read together. Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God enables me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in paths of righteousness for the sake of the divine. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Before the services, you noticed, no doubt, we had the ritual of Kriya, tearing. It comes from this passage of Kohelet. A time for tearing, a time for sowing. Susman we say together, season is set for everything. A time for every experience under heaven. A time for being born and a time for dying. for planting, a time for uprooting the planting, a time for slaying, and a time for healing, a time for tearing down, and a time for building up, a time for weeping, and a time for laughing, a time for throwing stones, and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing, and a time for refraining from embracing, a time for seeking, a time for keeping, a time for letting go, a time for tearing, a time for sowing, a time for silence. No words that are adequate. Speaking is that natural desire, that instinct to say, I have to say something, to express the life of a good neshama, life of a good soul. So, Steve's words. Wrote, write his own eulogy, but I, Steve Susman, did so. These are the words. Customary to tell those assembled at a funeral service what a virtuous, accomplished person Stephen was. So to fulfill that portion of this eulogy, Steve provided the following information. Very humor about himself and his life. He was born in December, July 23rd, 1935, near his mother. His wonderful parents were Graham and Helen Susman. Survived by 4 people he loves so very much. His brother Maury, his children Gary and Julie, and his wife Fran. And his parents, from his parents, he learned of the personal gratification that comes from public service and the wisdom of giving your kids substantial free rein in their thinking and doing. He didn't recognize until after his mother passed away in 1981 with severe depression what damage can be caused insidiously and unintentionally from failure of either spouse to acknowledge and express his or her feelings to the other. After all, that was the generation of Stoics. The let it all hang out generation was to follow. With his brother, Steve experienced the emotional closeness of having a sibling with whom he shared wrestling on the floral patterned living room carpet. Didn't your folks have one of those? A common educational and cultural experience at Harvard, an incredible amount of laughter and mutual quelling for their respective nephews and nieces. From his kids, he experienced the great joy of watching them mature, graduate with high honors from Harvard and Brandeis, and become solid, well-adjusted, happy, and loving spouses themselves. In Fran, Steve found unqualified devotion and a pure heart, but may have begun in part from the need of each of them for redemption from prior sorrows, blossomed into an enduring mutual respect and love. Steve graduated as valedictorian of his 719 student East High class, and then from Harvard College, and then from Harvard Law School. His 7 years at Harvard had a profound influence on his reverence for intellectual development. As a private, eschewing the several extra years that an officership would entail. While learning many ways to kill others, he grew to respect the role of our military in protecting the lifestyle we Americans so cherish. Word for Hebrew, spirit. The other word for spirit is nephesh, which is also wind blowing.
So is that Steve?
Most certainly. Most certainly. Steve served as a board member of the City Club in Denver. He counseled high school seniors on behalf of Harvard College. Harvard was an inconceivable reach for so many of them and their parents, but Steve opened the door of possibility and dreams for them. He actively was a fundraiser for the Allied Federation, Harvard College, Harvard Law School, the old Denver Symphony Orchestra, and other worthy causes. He served as president of the Denver Lodge of B'nai B'rith, an organization which he often constructively criticized for being so scholar. Steve served on the Mountain States Regional Board of the Anti-Defamation League, rising to the chairman of its council, and was elected to its national committee. For many years, he gave of his time and advice as a trustee of National Jewish Hospital, following in his father's footsteps. Steve served as president of the Civic Center Optimist Club, where he was involved in their charitable work for disadvantaged children. And he was one of the founders of Temple Sinai, helped purchase its first site, the Technological Center, and served on its earliest board. During all of this activity, seeds were sown for some of his major life-changing, terrible decisions. Rarely stopping to smell the daisies at 52, Steve suffered the perfect storm. He lost his marriage at 22 years. He lost his law practice. And he lost the considerable portfolio of investments he had accumulated all at the same time. In salvage mode, he founded and operated Rent a Cheap Heat, a jalopy rental agency catering to submarginal customers. This was a quintessential blue-collar venture. And some of the idealism that he had absorbed in his ADL work was tarnished in his dealings with certain allegedly disadvantaged classes. And during a holdup by armed thugs, retrieving his overdue cars dead of night. 10 years of this humbling experience, Steve served as a consultant to First Data Corporation, semi-retired, married friend, reveled in the detailed planning of their new townhouse. Together, they have taken several extended trips to many parts of the world and enjoyed their life together. For many recent years, Steve served as original director and president. Compensation, which widely noted was a collection of short to all. Fran and Steve produced the monumental memory book for its 50th East High School reunion in 2003. This magnificent tome, the accepted model for subsequent classes. At age 62, Steve began piano lessons, progressing from chopsticks to Don't Step on Suede Shoes. Diana, already enough of the facts. That it should give those kind persons who attend something valuable to take away. So if you remember only one or two of these recommendations, your coming here today was worthwhile. So here's the advice from his heart to yours. Don't wait to enjoy yourself until you're consulted a couple of persons who were dear to him, suffering the great loss of some wonderful friendships. These are 3. Be sure to drive westerly along East Avenue or East Bellevue in the mid-morning in winter or early morning in summer. Behold the majesty of our Rocky Mountains, snow-capped and reaching to the heavens. Self-inflated significance can be nightly deflated by such scenery. Also, look to the southeast as the sun rises over our lecture period. See colors on a clear day that arguably aren't available elsewhere in this good world. Hear a Mozart piano sonata. See a rendition of Puccini's La Boheme to sense what creative genius means. Sip of Bailey's Irish cream over the rocks with your friends as you barbecue, overcooks the steaks from Tony's Meats. The kosher version. Revel in the growth and the accomplishments of your children and your nephews and nieces and listen to them. Is it that important that you work on Sundays? They will grow up and move away so quickly, and you will have lost too many opportunities to enjoy each other. Forbear from preaching. Don't hesitate to drop a few crumbs of good advice when they're about to make some major decisions for themselves. Your advice will be ignored, but you'll feel better for having offered it. Realize that political idealism of their college days will eventually sensible and realistic conservative values as they experience the real life thereafter. 5. Accept that some days you're the statue, and some days you're the pigeon. 6. Donate your time and skills to one or few nonprofit activities. Reflect daily about how fortunate we are to be. Dinner to a needy family. Seek it. They think you know. Marriage. Acknowledge that Cherry Creek North is not the center of the world. Steve Ground Zero in New York City became a potent symbol of this world. Fran and he had been to Battery Park exactly 2 weeks before 9/11 on their way to Ellis Island. A year later, they visited that huge hole in the ground where America was attacked. If you don't think America is at war with an insidious, deadly culture, wake up and get real. We either fight them there or here. You choose. 9. Don't rely on a 6-minute television newscast for your information about what's going on. Be skeptical about some of what's reported in the daily newspapers. Take just a few moments daily to seek out and read an authoritative, relatively unbiased report of such happenings. Such an example, we are told that global warming will soon roast us like marshmallows at a Boy Scout camp. He knew he was going to get some political stuff in there. Yet only 3 decades ago, we were told that diseases and global temperatures will mean Manhattan will soon be buried in ice to the top of your friend's penthouse in Central Park West. Okay, then he goes 10. Forego 1 week in Vail, if need be, and devote those funds to purchasing a piece of art that you know will provide you with warm fuzzies forever. And finally, as in the game of Texas Hold'em, life deals each of us some strange hands. Take some calculated risks in your business life and in your love life. Mark Twain said, in the final analysis, the turnout at your funeral will depend on the weather. Whatever the weather is today, he would have wanted you to. Or actually, I think this is one who's known him the longest. Why don't you come and share about your brother?
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi, your act is
very difficult to follow, but even greater difficulty is that you just read. So I'm not going to try to do that, but I do have a couple of thoughts, and I'll be brief. In my hand, I'm holding a letter that's 66 years old. A friend found it and gave it to me. I didn't write it to Steve. Portable typewriter. At that time, I was finishing my sophomore year at Harvard College, and he was graduating from Boston. We had a hell of a time together for 2 years. So my first sentence reads, "Dear Steve, it will be with a great deal of sadness that I bid you farewell from Cambridge. What I don't mention, but will tell all of you quite candidly, is he had a wonderful red Mercury coupe. And with that coupe, I was able to make substantial moves on all the women's colleges around Cambridge, which without transportation would have been very difficult, although I think I would have found it. But Steve came back to Denver. I continued my Harvard education. I was making calls as recently as yesterday to friends. Steve is an extremely aristocratic guy. I see John DeQ is here today, and he may remember one Neil Bluth from East High School. And Neil, I remember as well. Neil said to me, honored, and he said the following thing. He said, Steve was super articulate. So let's all think about that. He was super articulate. In my mind, at times to excess. And I would say that as your line there, brother. But I felt that way. But he was super articulate. And the other more insightful thing that Neil said to me was, Steve, listen to this carefully, Steve could convert rational thinking or logic into humor. He was able to do that. His sense of humor, I think Rabbi's already given us a close look at that, was incredible. And so the idea of converting rational logic, I think it was pretty amazing. I certainly don't agree with all the messages that he was I would liberate those with which I have a difference, but I'm not shaking my head. I wouldn't do that today, but so what did Steve mean for me? What were the two things? Briefly, he inspired in me the importance of academic achievement, being a good student, studying hard, trying to learn from those who were capable of teaching you, study, work hard. And he did that. He was an inspirational guy in that way. Again, not always the way I might do things, but nevertheless, he inspired me to succeed successfully, or to succeed academically, emphasize the importance of sense of humor. I hope I haven't won badly here today, but maybe I have a little of his sense of humor. We had a good time sharing things for years. We had our in-jokes, which went on forever and ever and ever, and frankly, they'll continue to go on. The last thing I want to say really doesn't have anything to do with Steve. I loved him, and but I missed that out. It has all to do with his wife, Fran. Okay, so when I was a practicing physician, I had a lot of nicknames. And I was coming down the hall or in the operating room, the nurses said, watch out. because I was very particular about how my patients were taken care of. One of my favorite nicknames, well, was Fussy Sussy. Everything had to be just right. I've met my match right here, sitting in front of me is Fran. For the past 20 some years, she cared for Steve. Initially, not so much care, but planned all the details of their life, their travel, down to everything. No screw-ups, because Fran was taking charge. But what really got to me, and over the past 4 to 5 months since Steve broke his hip, which led to his ultimate demise, is that I've gotten to know Fran so much better and seen her care for Steve, particularly in the past 2 to 4 weeks, in a way which Fussy Sussy would give an A+ to. And that is really something, Fran. I watched you care for him and watched you love him. And I'll not forget that. That's what I want to say about my brother Steve. And I hope he rests in peace and has some, just has a good doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, as you've all observed, Dad was always trying to teach people things. He was a very smart man, although perhaps not as smart as he thought he was. Just from his personal example, I learned a lot about how to live my life and also about how not to live my life. But we're all flawed human beings, as Rabbi Ryan's reminded our family of the Vidui, and it's best to remember the good things. Here's some of the ones I remember. I wrote down a whole lot of personal stories here. I don't think I'm going to share them all, but I remember the bike rides that we used to take when Julie and I were small enough to fit on the back of his and Mom's bicycles, little tiny seats. Julie and I wrestling with him on the bed every Sunday morning. We're then spending those Sunday afternoons in the basement. The three of us, Dad, Julie, and I, listening to the Brandenburg concertos and sorting out Dad's canceled checks. This was what we considered fun back then.
I'm sure I was coloring.
Yeah, you. Yeah, I remember Dad and me climbing onto the roof so that we could put up a basketball net. Dad trying to teach me how to shoot baskets, even though he wasn't particularly good at it. Years later, I remember being on the back of another bike of Dad's. This was his Honda motorcycle. Imagine both of us in our three-piece suits. I was 13. The rush on the way to get to Stephen Gottesfeld's bar mitzvah. So there we were in our three-piece suits, born to be wild on our motorcycle, driving down Monaco towards BMH. I remember working alongside Dad at Cheap Heaps. And, as he said, working with some of the more colorful residents of Colorado as they came to us on East Colfax to get a used car. Remember all those family trips we took all over Colorado. As you can tell from what he said, he really did love living here and loved nature, loved the Rockies. Loved taking us to places as far away as Mesa Verde or close as Estes Park. And go and each get a piece of fudge, all four of us, and have a contest to see who could make theirs last the longest. Contest that Julie always won. Remember one particular trip into the mountains that Dad and I took, just the two of us. We'd gone to Yom Kippur services in the morning. And that afternoon, Dad and I just drove up I-70 until we found a large grove of aspen. And, Dad wanted to show me how to use his 35mm camera, so we went out there and just took pictures of the aspen leaves as they turned to gold. I remember Dad dropping me off in Harvard Yard, completing that circle that he'd started 32 years earlier as a freshman. I remember Uncle Maury dropping us off at the airport so that we could go to Harvard. Still have his foot locker all these years later. I remember Dad and Fran's wedding in Boston. How I was grateful to Fran for having rescued him, but I think he rescued her too. I remember all the in-jokes like Uncle Maury was just talking about that he and I used to share, cracking up over the same punchlines for years and decades. And I remember the last Father's Day that we spent at his and Fran's old townhouse where Dad was out there cooking burgers in the rain. Another thing that Dad was always trying to teach me how to do better, even though he was only so good at it himself. Burgers got burnt, but it tasted very good. Somehow I knew that was going to be the last time that we did that. Dad mentioned his membership in the Optimist Club. He was an optimist in his own life. He was always responding to adversity and obstacles, not by wallowing or complaining or getting depressed, but by picking himself up, moving forward, trying again. Even during this last health setback, he thought he would recuperate. We were at Fran's just yesterday and discovered he still had about 20 unopened boxes of sugary cereal, which Fran does not eat. Apparently, he was sure he'd get better and get around to eating those 20 boxes. Now that's optimism. So Dad's gone, but I know he'll still be teaching me for the rest of my life.
My brother was going to be a hard act to follow. Talk about who my dad was to me. My dad was funny. We all know that. He doesn't get all the credit for my sense of humor, but he was definitely funny. He made up silly nicknames for lots of my classmates and still remember them 50 years later. He told me once that his humor got him in trouble in basic training when he had to learn pretty quickly on day one not to mouth off to his superiors. And when he was a kid or maybe a teen, he got in trouble in Sukkot one year. I hope this is a true story. Rabbi Kavar shook the lulav and the etrog east, south, west, and north. And Dad said, "Manual." Dad always told me I was a good learner, which was from a Woody Allen quote that was very popular on t-shirts in the 70s when I was a kid. It said, "Be alert, the world needs more alerts." And Dad said, "I'm a good learner." That was his way of saying he thought I had a good head on my shoulders. When my life had its ups and downs, Dad would say, "You've always been a good learner." Meaning he knew I'd find a way forward. Dad didn't give me a lot of advice, but he always asked how my car was, which I know is Dad speak for "I love you." We did have some serious talks from time to time. We didn't see eye to eye, about politics at all. Sorry, Dad, I am not ever becoming a conservative. And I wondered what he'd say when I called him up 10 years ago to tell him that the person I've been dating was a woman named Libby. And he said the exact right thing. He said, I've been on this planet for 80 years. I've seen a lot of things. If being with Libby makes you happy, then be happy. Because I'm happy for you. Dad, thank you for your love and support, and your humor, and your grammar lessons, and a lot more. I promise to get my car's oil changed regularly, to be a good learner, to make as many terrible puns as possible, and to think of you. I love you.
But first, I would like to thank all of the friends and family that are here. Thank you for loving Steve. Also, thanks to his East Coast Harvard friends. Steve really valued friendship, and especially his friendship with Don Shapiro on the East Coast. They were friends for 73 years. So thanks to them for loving Steve. My family, my 4 sisters, my extended family, you love Steve unconditionally and welcome him to our family. We had many happy times together, especially over meals. Steve always wanted to know, when's the next celebration? When's the next holiday? He knew he'd see the family, knew he'd have good food. He also enjoyed imparting wisdom to his great nephews. And we know Steve had a lot of wisdom to impart. One of my sisters said, when Steve married you, it was a package deal. He got my family too. I couldn't do this without you guys. So Steve came into my life when I was broken. I had lost my son. And I thought I would never laugh again. It wasn't going to happen. Well, you know, Steve could be a funny guy. He made me laugh. He brought joy into my life when I thought I would never find it again. And I like to think I brought joy into his life too. We came together at the right time. We traveled the world together, whether traipsing through the Angkor Wat temples, trying new foods in Italy or France, being in the ocean with the stingrays in the South Pacific, or just being on a cruise ship, sitting on our balcony, watching the sunset over the ocean, just the 2 of us, enjoying being together. We had a good night. So Steve, thank you for being in my life. Thank you for loving me. Because I love you deeply. This is gonna, but I would not have changed a thing, except maybe more time. Memory be a blessing.
I just want to share a few words that Steve didn't write for me. This week, we conclude reading from the book of Exodus with a double Torah portion, Vayakel and Pekudei. It concludes with the words, Bechol Maseichem, all their journeys. It's an apt expression for Steve. As I read the eulogy he wrote, he wanted to make sure that the highlights of his journeys, at least up to 2011, were covered. And like our ancestors, he did not shy away from covering the setbacks and the mistakes he made that shook apart his professional and personal life. But he also wrote that he took on the new challenges, as unpleasant some of them were. And he did what he could to rebuild his life. Steve did not hesitate to go on and building something new. He and Karen were among the founding members of Temple Sinai. Rabbi Zwaren still marvels at what it took for those early handful of families that created our congregation. He said, they knew that it was only me and they still joined to build a new community. They did so not only through making contributions, but even more vitally, through rolling up their sleeves and doing the work, setting up the services, inviting friends, and spreading the word. Note that the first Torah reading of this week, again, it's Vayakel, Pickle Day. Vayakel means, and he congregated. He created a congregation, a community. Indeed, Steve was very proud of having been a part of Sinai's creation. He continued to offer leadership and advice up to the most recent years. Speaking of advice, as you know, Steve was never shy about sharing his well thought out opinions. And since he and I shared the love of learning and talking about anything and everything under the sun, I treasured my visits with him. Of course, my office was the best, but even when he was struggling in the hospital or in rehab, his creative and intellectual enthusiasm were inspiring. And like the Harvard-trained lawyer he was, Steve could take either side of an argument in order to keep it interesting, but he chose more often than not to reflect only on the conservative perspective. We always concluded our time together with spiritual reflection and prayer. You may not all know that about Steve, but he was deeply spiritual. At least he did with me. We talked about God's blessings of life and the challenges that we face. One of the great blessings of his life was the love he shared with you, friend. You were truly his angel. You showed such patience and strength as you helped to nurse him over these past several years. And you did it out of love, the pure goodness of your heart. Just before he passed away, we gathered for the doing, the final prayers of confession and contrition. When I arrived, I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to connect with us because he had gone through a diminishing of abilities. But he did connect. He rallied. And Julie and Gary and Renee and Fran and I spoke. And it was a precious moment of asking for forgiveness and of giving forgiveness, acknowledging the often rough and hurtful episodes that color our relationships. The vidui is an opportunity to let go of the pain, be left with goodness, appreciation, and love. Renee, you said as much yesterday. The shortness of our life's journeys. Let us resolve to forgive and then to re-embrace. The book of Exodus concludes. All of their journeys. Our journeys are not all victories and achievements. Our journeys are not all sweet and tender. We know better than that. Rather, our ancestors wanted to teach us that no matter what happens in our in our journeys, hold tight to one another. Come together as family and community and embrace with hope, faith, and with love. Steve Susman would say, Zecher Livracha, may he be remembered as a blessing. The most difficult part of today is the burial, the saying of goodbye. And as we lower the casket, I ask you to please rise. נתן אדוני לך כי איש אדוני מבורך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר יצא אתכם בצבא וזר מחכה אתכם בטובו והעמיד אתכם בדין ונטע בתוככם חיי עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני דיין האמת. We praise you, Adonai, our God, Lord of the universe, who forms us in the divine image and nourishes and sustains us. Who causes all of us to be but mortal, and yet who has implanted immortal life within us. We praise you, O God. So make the flame of faith holy, Matirasoli. Kayem Emotoloshne Afar, Michamocha Balga Bolota Midomala, Melach Nemid, Umachayim Atiyah, Baruch Chatar Nayatea, Bachenu Kaye Olam. Eternal is your might, O God. All life is your gift. Great is your power to save. With love, sustain the living, and with great compassion, you give life to all. You send help to the falling and healing to the sick. You bring freedom to the captive and keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. We praise you, O God, who plants eternal life within us. Tim Cohen and Feldmans has provided for us earth from Jerusalem, which will be the first earth that we place. Then we will have an opportunity, each of us, take shovels, make sure that there's kabura, that we successfully bury and protect the remains of Susman. This earth from Jerusalem is actually from Mount Olives. And consider the holiest place in the world. Not everyone can be buried on Mount Olives. So that's why I'm calling make sure that they bring some of that. Fulfilled. Most mitzvot we makdimim zim mitzvah. We rise up early in order to fulfill the mitzvah. But for this, we hesitate, as we hesitated coming from the coach to this place. So the first shovel to look back. Say we don't want to say goodbye. Then we turn the face of the shovel over. We don't be here before the physical remains are protected. And just as we're protecting the physical remains, we know that the spiritual remains, again, that love prepared for us, those are in our heart and soul as well. When you finish placing some earth on the casket, take the shovel, place it back into the earth so that the next person will be able to grab it at their leisure. Please, on either side of the shovels.
Yeah, it's why I got two inches. These are super disgusting. Tiny little. Well, thank you.
Everybody, if you can gather together just for one more prayer. First of all, I want to remind everyone that the family, all the loved ones, friends are invited back to Moyne home right afterwards. And we'll gather there. Obviously, there'll be an opportunity to get a little fight as well, but also to share some prayers and to say Kaddish again and to share your stories. We've had full Kabura. Kabura is when you cover the casket. So each of us know that you've done everything here. Thank you guys for to protect his remains. So our attention turns to his neshama. And if you look at the bottom of all of these headstones, you see an acronym. It says Tiye Neshamat Torah B'Tzar Chayim. That acronym comes from this prayer we're about to chant. It says, may it be that his neshama, his soul, the soul will be bounded with the bond of chayim, life. And the soul will be bound up not only with God who creates life, but the soul will be bound up with chayim, the living, with you. So remember him with goodness of God. And on page 4, you'll find this memorial prayer. If you're able, please rise. Shalom ben Goran, v'chana shalach le'olamo, v'gan eden dream ruchato, v'chen malachim yasirehu, v'seta kenafav le'olamim, v'tzor v'tzor ha'chayim, en nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Say in English, O God, exalted and full of compassion, we pray that you will grant perfect peace and eternal comfort in your sheltering presence to the blessed soul of Steve. God of mercy, protect his neshama forever. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Adonai, you are his portion. May he rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. The Kagi Shachon, the mourner's Kaddish, on the next page, page 5. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Amen. Ve'alma, Devarah, Chalutei, Ve'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayedecho Be'Israel, Ba'agalav Izman Kari V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah, Mevarach, Ve'olam Ulamei Almaya, Yeparach V'yishtabach, Yepar'ar, V'tromam V'yitnaseh, V'tadar, V'taleh, V'talah, Shemei D'Kurishah, Ve'ela, Min Kol Berchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata, V'nechamata, Ve'amiram Ba'alma, V'yirmu, Amen. Yehi Shalama, Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'chol Yisrael, V'yirmu, Amen. Osei Shalom, V'yasei Shalom, Aleinu, V'chol Yisrael. That last page, page 6, with that wonderful photograph of Steve with Julie and Gary. I think it was a Harvard Yard, right? Harvard Square. Harvard Square. Remind ourselves. Say together. The ties of love that death cannot sever, the companionship we shared along life's path, those gifts of heart and mind which have now become a precious heritage. For all this and more, we are grateful. Now help us, O compassionate God, not to dwell on sorrow and pain. Help us instead to find within our hearts the courage to return to the tasks of life and its joys. Amen. God comfort you along with all who mourn. Dying mentions.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That does conclude our service today.